to Wealthy Living Podcast. I'm Lisa, your host and founder of Wealthy Living. It is here that I connect with a variety of wonderful humans to have inspiring and insightful conversations to help you live a meaningful, connected, and well life. A place to learn and grow in confidence and clarity to make choices that support your well-being, both personally and professionally. So today I have a special guest with me, the content coach, Jo Johnson, and we're going to talk about the power of storytelling. So welcome, Jo.
Thanks, Lisa. It's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Nice to have you. Nice to see you again.
Yeah.
Jo is a coastal dwelling, French cheese loving kind of girl who has been a word nerd her entire life and a business babe for half of it. Her online passion began with shoe shopping, but quickly morphed into marketing and content creation. She has a big brand corporate pedigree, but her true gift lies in helping small business owners find the freedom, fun, and flexibility in their business by telling stories. So, like so many people need that, Jo. And I think where I want to start is this powerful quote that you shared with me from Steve Jobs. And I've seen that before. And it says, the most powerful person in the room is the storyteller. The storyteller sets the vision, values, and agenda of an entire generation that is to come.
Yes.
And there's so much within that just couple of sentences. So I was thinking maybe you can talk a little bit to that quote and why is the storyteller and their story so powerful?
Sure. I think it really goes back to very, very ancient times where humans have really always been hardwired to understand and remember stories. And always the stories that traveled from camp to camp or tribe to tribe were the most evocative, the most valuable, and the best told, really. And for that reason, they become the most memorable.
Mm.
So it's a bit like Chinese whispers, yeah? When someone tells the story and tells it really, really well to start with, the very key points are going to be delivered successfully.
Yeah.
And I think that is still true today. Humans have evolved, absolutely, since cave times, but we have not physiologically really changed a whole lot. And I think that what's so powerful, both in the boardroom or, small business these days, is that rather than trying to deliver messages via data and facts and fiction and all of those statistics and things that we've come to rely on because we have those now, we need to get back to basics and actually deliver our value and our messages in really, really well told stories with character and plot and place, because that's actually what humans remember. We sometimes find it really challenging to remember numbers and specific words or specific lessons, but we will much more easily recall things like a character and what made them feel a certain way. And it is that connection between the words that are told in a story and the way that it makes us feel as the listener or the reader of that story. Because in that feeling, we actually internalize the information and we start to make that, it really imprints itself on us. And that's really what we remember moving forward.
Yeah, absolutely. So is what you're saying a little bit that sometimes the lived experience of a person is more important to be sharing than necessarily the specific expertise? Because often when you're sharing specific expertise, it does come often to facts and figures and information, which, as you shared, could be a little bit dry or a little bit less connective. So
Yeah.
where does lived experience come in, and how do you get that balance between trusting somebody when they're just sharing their lived experience or their story or their emotions compared to maybe having the sound knowledge?
Yeah, so there's a couple of things I want to talk to around that. Firstly, I want to make a differentiation between that sort of core story, or what you're describing as that lived experience,
Yep.
versus stories that can also be told to deliver expertise.
Okay.
So a core story or your lived experience story is that maybe it's that rags to riches story, it's that stuff that's happened, it's the sort of stories that you might tell when you're trying to build relationship with somebody. So and you can do this both online, offline, written form, video form, however you like. So that's the stories that you would tell to let people understand a bit more about you, to
Mm.
get them to understand your values and where you sit in the world and maybe on the spectrum of expertise. But that story is not something that you can keep telling. Yeah, you can't keep telling that story over and over again and expect people to come along for the ride each time.
Mm.
So that is that sort of core story or those lived experiences. And yes, it's 100% important to share that. And, when I work with people around doing this on social media, for instance, it's about sharing small snippets of those lived experiences that will allow your audience to get to know you, that will allow them to get to understand where you sit in a particular value set, if you like, what you deem is important, what you like, what you don't like, the sort of people that you like to work with, because that will allow them to either opt in or opt out.
Mm.
And either response is perfectly fine. Any of these sort of stories that we share should be dividing an audience.
Mm.
And I say that really, really seriously. Do not be trying to please all the people all the time with your stories. Your lived experience is what it is. Don't colour it, paint it to be something that it's not. Some people will resonate with it and others won't. And that's perfectly fine because you cannot help all of those people. And the point of telling stories is to get your sorts of people who value the things that you value, who are your kind of people, you're trying to get them into your world. So
Mm.
that's that lived experience story. The other side of the coin is being able to deliver your expertise in a way that isn't dry, isn't just facts and figures, but to actually wrap that experience and expertise in stories as well. And there's a lot of different ways to do that. But one of the ways that I teach is something called the everyday moment storytelling technique. And it's really about taking an everyday exchange. So it might be an exchange with your barista that morning. And there's something that he said that particularly resonates with you or sparks something in your mind that allows you to then talk to your audience using that experience and being able to deliver it.
Yeah.
And so, for instance, this happens a lot with me now, and it happens once you get really tuned into this. It's quite fun and it's quite easy to do. So I will take an exchange at the dog park, for instance, about someone telling me about something that's happened with their dog or their kid that weekend or whatever it is, and use that to deliver information about how important it is to paint a picture when you're
Yes.
trying to tell a story or something like that. And you will start to see these experiences and these moments everywhere you go. And my head gets very noisy because of this, but it's actually really, really fun. And it's quite a great way of consistently delivering your value to your audience without having to say, I'm really good at doing this and you need to do this.
Yeah.
Yeah, it becomes much more colourful and much more fun for both you and your audience.
Yeah, I mean, another example I can think of as soon as you say that is that I say last weekend spent time at my daughter's gymnastics competition. And every time I watch her on the beam, I just go, oh my God, look how far you've come. And how many times have you had to fall off that beam and split the beam? I've seen her legs bruised with the splitting of the beam in order to be able to perform that routine. So when I then talk about maybe some personal development topics around failure and around, resistance and grit and getting up and learning a new skill and the practice that it takes, then obviously I can relate it to situations where I'm, watching her do and seeing how that relates, to be used in any circumstance.
Absolutely, absolutely. And it's much more interesting because what I'll remember is your poor daughter splitting on the beam, right? And I'll remember that, but by virtue of remembering her in that gorgeous, outfit, like I can visualize it already, what I'll remember is, yeah, grit, determination, shit, really, really should sort of try a bit harder at that, whatever
Yeah.
that thing is. Yeah. So it's far more powerful. It's much more interesting too. And it means that you actually never run out of things to say.
Yeah.
Because one of the number one things that I hear from, clients and prospects all the time is, oh, I don't have time to write and I don't know what to say.
Mm.
Right? So that's the things they say. I just don't know what to say. I've told everyone my story. What else is there to tell?
Mm.
But there's always something to tell. There is always something that's happening in your world that once you're attuned to it, you can start to relate back to deliver your value to your people.
Yeah, I mean, the thing that comes straight to mind when you just were speaking then was the show Seinfeld. I mean, it's a show about nothing, and yet it's been so popular. And it's a show about all the little silly, stupid day-to-day things that they're making a whole story or even a whole episode about.
Yeah, yeah. And also when you can add humour, storytelling really takes on a whole other level. But not all of us are natural comedians, and that's fine. It doesn't have to be humorous, but injecting a bit of humour into your stories can actually really help. And I know that for sure in my little space, because business and all of this stuff can get really heavy
Yeah.
sometimes. And I'm very much about, yes, there's time to do the work, and there's time to be serious, and there's time to dig deep and get
Mm.
really get to the grid of what's going on. But there's also much more time than I think we give it credit for to be light and to have some levity in our world and to not take ourselves so seriously, certainly not take business so seriously, and just to have some of those laughs both at yourself and the craziness of the world, particularly when we look around us at the moment and we see empty shelves and people stocking up toilet paper and going crazy. Like, let's have a little bit of a laugh at ourselves and say, well, how can we deliver some messages but do it in a fun way that's memorable.
Yeah, and I mean that's probably, like you said, it's sometimes that's the hardest line to draw, because it is when you try to be funny. Sometimes if you don't communicate it in the right voice, in the right way, and when you are writing things and not speaking, the tone gets lost. So the
Yeah.
interpretation on that tone can be seen as offensive rather than funny sometimes. So yeah, I do, I really agree with that idea of bringing humor in or bringing lightness in to situations that are either heavy or dark or mundane, or even the whole personal development growth, industry of always, like, it's a bit heavy sometimes. So to bring some lightness into that, but it is tricky in how to do that. So do you have any suggestions if you are doing that? Like, is there a way of reading your work over to sort of with a certain eye or a certain ear so that you can see, or do you check in with somebody else, or like what do you do in those situations, or do you just go for it and see what happens?
Yeah, look, I think it comes back to sort of basics marketing 101. You have to know your audience. You've got to know where their buttons are. You've got to know what they'll tolerate. And in the absence of knowing them, I would always err on the side of gentle
Yep.
with things like humour. Don't be too un-PC. Don't get too dark. But so, for instance, I know my audience really, really well now. I've been doing this a long time. I know how I can speak to them,
Mm.
and I know they know me, and they know that I'm no bullshit when it comes to getting stuff done, and I'm serious accountability taskmaster, but I'm also really light about things. I will inject the funny into the room if things are too heavy.
Yep.
That's a role that I take. But when I write, I am really, like, I would be really, really clear with them about the importance of a message, but then I'll wrap it up in a funny sort of story. And they know me well enough now, most of them, that they'll be able to take it the right way. If you don't know your audience that well, or they don't know you that well yet, as I said, I'd probably err on the side of caution with some of this stuff. And what I would, when you're writing particularly, but what I'd suggest is that you build your audience and that you get them to understand your humour via video. So
Yep.
be doing more video, more audio, so to build that audience and to build that relatability so that they can understand whether you've got a dark humour or a really sarcastic wit or whatever it is. And then that will translate to your writing more easily. But definitely what you mentioned, getting someone else to check in on that and have a look at it. If you've written a blog that you think's hilarious, and that you want to send out there, but you just think, I don't know if that's going to be a little bit for somebody, just get someone else who is in your target audience, mind you, to read it, not just your partner or your friend. It's got to be someone who's in your target audience, who might be having the pain points that your people have, and see whether it hits the mark.
Yeah.
Humour's a challenge though. Humour is, everybody has a different sense of humour.
Yeah.
And some people will find something funny and others just won't. That's how it is. And you can't please it.
I'm hilarious, but I don't know how some people don't see that.
Exactly. Right?
God.
Yeah, and that's the thing. So you just got to, like anything, test and measure, test and measure. If it fails, if it flops, don't worry about it. Next time, send something out and go, okay, so that fell flat. Why? What do you guys not like about it? Whatever, and be really honest and open. It is actually the only way to connect with people and to build audience, is to be really honest and open with them and ask those questions. So, I thought it was funny. Why didn't you guys? Literally ask them. And then someone will come back and say, oh, actually, I did. I was just chuckling quietly and I didn't respond. Or they will go, oh, I just didn't get you. Whatever it is, you need to know.
Absolutely. And part of that is when you come back and say those things, that's a part of the connection anyway, because that builds rapport and connection. So there's a few things based on just that little bit of sharing that you gave that I picked up on. And one of those was the planning part of content. So if you are someone who either has a blog or is thinking, more so someone who might be thinking about either starting a blog, thinking of having more content shared on social media, writing a program. I mean, we're at a time now, like you said, where the world's in a bit of chaos and crisis. We could be in lockdown and people are going to really, like, the timeliness of this podcast is quite good, because people are going to be looking at ways that they can communicate online. Whether it be taking some of their coaching online, or they're teaching, or doing programs, or just putting out more content, but there's going to be a lot more content creation online. So people aren't necessarily all don't have the expertise in doing that. What would you advise around the balance between the like you said, test and measure, and the really sitting down with someone like yourself or another coach, or themselves, if they feel like they've got the reflection skills and the planning skills, to really start to get really solid on the core foundations of what it is that they are trying to achieve? Like, what is the message overall to put out? What sort of tone do they want to look at? And is it important to maybe really take that self-awareness and self-knowledge piece really into action of your own personality, and how much of your personality you want to come across, which is that, like, some people aren't naturally funny people, and some are. Some people want their information to be serious. Some people want it to be lighter. Like, how important is that planning phase?
Super important. Super duper important. But there is also time and space in business communications to be off the cuff.
Yeah.
So, and that's something that takes a little bit of effort and a little bit of training to do well. And it sounds dumb to have to train to be off the cuff, but if it's not your natural gig, like if you get nervous in front of a camera, if you stumble over your words, if you've always been very planned and organised and orderly, it's not easy to just step up in front of a live camera and go for it. But there is definitely space for that off the cuff stuff. The majority of your content should actually be planned and quite strategic. The key is in making it not look like there is an end game all the time, because that becomes tiresome and people see through it.
Absolutely.
So that's where the really, really challenging part is for a lot of people. Having it planned, organised and strategic, but not looking like you're constantly in for the kill.
Yeah, absolutely.
So a couple of things, and you touched on a couple of them. Some things to really, really be clear on is your audience. Like, what are their absolute pain points and how do you help to solve those? If you don't know that, you don't have a business. So you must know that. And when you know that, then you've got a business and you can write about it. or create content around it, whatever form that takes. So what are their half a dozen, top 5 key pain points, and how do you solve those? That's
Can I stop you
absolutely,
there? Can you
yep,
just give an example for someone who doesn't really understand what you mean when you say pain points?
yep,
What
sure.
are some examples that you could give that are somebody's pain points?
Sure. So, for an example, my clients, my ideal clients, one of their top pain points is that they don't have time in the week to keep writing content for their business.
Yep.
They know they should, but they don't know how, or they don't have the time.
Yep.
So, what I teach them is how to find time in their week. So, we look at what they're doing in terms of scheduling, and I teach them to create once and use multiple times. The process of repurposing content allows them to feel like they've created a whole lot of content, but they only have to sit down once for it. So
Yep.
I have a specific way to solve that problem of I don't have enough time. That's a pain point. Yep. So, so that's the number one thing. You really have to know those pain points and how you solve them. The
Yep.
next thing you need to know is how do you speak? What is your tone?
Yep.
How do you want to be perceived? Now, I'm a huge advocate of write the way that you speak,
Yep. Me too.
because I think it is actually the only way to genuinely sound unique. Otherwise, we end up copycatting.
Yep.
Right? It's really easy to end up speaking like Marie Forleo if she is your demigoddess, right? It's really easy to start speaking like, you know, Denise Duffield Thomas or Liz Gilbert or any of these women who we admire in their businesses. It's super easy to fall into the trap of sounding like them. Even if you don't think you are, you are. And I read this stuff all the time. It's all over the internet. So I genuinely believe the only way to be able to sound unique in your writing and in your spoken word is literally to write the way that you speak. And this was a huge hurdle for me because I am a, you know, master's grad in English literature, and I was, you know, the word nerd, as I said, my entire life. I've always been about correct grammar and spelling and all those sorts of things. And when I started to write the way that I spoke, I realized that I started sentences with and but. And it horrified me to write that way, but it made a huge impact on my writing.
Well, it works well for people like me who didn't do as well in English literature, and I wasn't a grammar queen and any of those things. So this way of writing is just perfect for me. People say to me, "What do you mean? Like, you're a really good writer?" And I'm thinking, really? Like, go and speak to my English teachers at school. I know that they would get maths. I was, yes, very good at English, not as much, but as soon as I could actually take out what I learned at school and be me and write, it's actually so much easier, because journaling was something I always did, and that's kind of like the same way of writing.
It is. So really, really important to do that, to just remove, and I find that working with people who have been in sort of research jobs or highly academic spaces really are challenged by this, really challenged by it. So I've got a bunch of techniques around how to get that happening as well, but that's really important. So you've got to get, you know, that ideal client, you've got to 100% know them, and you've also got to really start focusing on writing the way that you speak. Then you've got to say, okay, so what is my strategy? What are the key buckets of knowledge that I want to impart? Because they are my passion, my value, my expertise. And again, you'll probably have 4 or 5 of those that are your key sort of buckets of knowledge that you talk about all the time. And they're the things that you charge for, right? They're the things that, you know, as a coach or a consultant or an expert, that you're selling. And those are the things that you need to consistently write and create content for. So you don't want to be writing across a whole plethora of everything that you've ever known in the world. You need to think about your ideal client, how you help them, how are you going to say this, and what is your unique position on this topic, and what are those things that I need to write to, and you keep creating content to those 4 or 5 things consistently every month. Socials, emails, blogs, programs, it should all hang together.
Oh, so then I want to talk to then about the taking imperfect action, because that comes a little bit then under the test and measure, and you know, it is balanced it balances out this idea of really planning and really knowing your style, knowing your voice. Like, can you learn your style? Can you learn your voice? Can you learn all that by taking imperfect action?
Yeah, look, you can. You definitely can, because you learn by doing. That's the end of the day. I can teach you a whole range of techniques to get you there faster. And I think that's why you get a coach, right? We all can learn how to run. We can all learn how to use the weights at the gym, but we get a coach or a PT because it gets us there faster.
Yeah.
And it's the same with content coaching. Yeah. So I have techniques and processes to help you uncover your writing voice, to help you build that content strategy, to help you repurpose effectively. So all of those things can be taught, but yes, you can look something up and you can start and you can get there. Particularly the voice stuff, you don't actually just go and buy a voice off the shelf. You actually already have your own writing voice. You just need to learn to trust it. And building confidence in that is another thing that I do in most of my coaching, is around that stuff, because you can learn the technique, but having the confidence to trust it and consistently produce in that voice is something that takes time and accountability and prodding. But, to answer your question, imperfect action is great and progress is better than perfection, 100%. It's just something that takes time. Most people get a little bit wary of it though, and they get a little bit impatient. And that's what I find, where I can step in to help people get there faster, so that the impatience piece doesn't come in and they don't throw their hands up and say, bugger it, I'm not doing anything.
Yeah.
And a lot of people do.
Yeah.
They just say, "Oh, it's too hard, I'm not doing it."
Yeah, exactly. And, that brings me to a few things. One is that probably imperfect action is really good, but at the same time, you've also got to have a certain standard for yourself as well. Like, taking imperfect action doesn't mean just putting out stuff which is substandard to your level, and maybe assessing your standards. Because I know for me, often what can stop me is not that I am a perfectionist, but I have a really high standard of myself. And so often I get stuck and not put things out or not move forward with things because I don't want to deliver something that's substandard for what I see as substandard, which other people might as I said, everybody's got different levels. So what
Yeah.
I think is substandard might be here, whereas someone else is down here. So I suppose how to get that balance between still taking action, and what stops someone from taking those actions.
Yeah, and you're right. It's all a levels thing. I am fanatical about punctuation and spelling. I just think it's inexcusable to get that wrong. And there is a difference between knowing the rules and then being able to break them, and just not knowing them and abusing them. And so that's my standard. And other people just go, fuck it, it's a Facebook post, who cares?
Yeah.
Fine, no problem. That's you, this is me.
Yeah.
So it's about finding your own level and understanding what that looks like for you. So in terms of writing, I think there are different techniques, there's different processes and practices that you can go through to be able to get to a point where you're comfortable. And it might be that you write a blog to yourself for the next 6 weeks, one a week for the next 6 weeks, until you're comfortable that you're actually saying something in an effective way, that you've got some structure around it, that it's not just a rant and a ramble or a journal entry, it's actually a genuine blog which delivers information in an informative way and a memorable way. That's the difference between sort of a blog and a genuine blog, a genuine sort of journaling piece. So, that might be something that you need to do, is take that action of just committing to writing a blog to yourself every week for the next 6 weeks, until you start to hear how you speak too. You'll start to feel where you stumble when you're writing. You'll get to a point where you go, oh my God, I'm just rambling and I've written 1,500 words and I still haven't gotten to the point. So then the next one, you'll go, okay, well, how can I state my point up front and then go on to explain it? So there's different ways of checking in on yourself and understanding how to make it an effective piece of writing. And there are, some actual rules around an effective piece of writing. And it is different to perhaps just a short Facebook post or an Instagram post where you're kind of just blurting out a moment in time. If
Mm.
you're writing a blog or you're trying to write, feature articles for people, or you're trying to write pages on your website, there are actual rules around how you can do this effectively so that it sits well, it's good for SEO, it conveys an opinion or it conveys some points of view in a short enough time frame that people will read it and remember it. And
Mm.
then there's things around calls to action and all of that stuff too. So there's some framework that does need to be learned, but you can play with it. And once you know it, then you can start to break the rules a bit.
Oh, you're such a wealth of knowledge. Everyone needs a Joe in their life.
Thanks, darling. Well, I'm in yours.
Yeah, I know, lucky. So, it's really interesting because when you talked about this, like getting it right and that levels and everybody having that different level, I think what's really important to sort of go on with now to talk a little bit about is things that actually cannot serve us and keep us stuck based on things like our standard. And it's not that we necessarily need to change our standard to becoming lower, but maybe we need to reflect on what is our standard and is the current standard we have serving us, and as well look on other things that might be stopping us moving forward, including things like how worthy or valuable we think our stuff is, or feeling overwhelmed and comparing to others, and some of those things that really frustrate people and keep them stuck. So let's talk a little bit about those things that don't serve in order for us to take action.
Yeah, absolutely. So that perfectionist thing, I suffered from that 100%, because, as I said before, I was coming from that very, even though I'd been in corporate for many years, my actual academic background was very humanities oriented. So history, English literature major, all that stuff, politics. So I'd written reams and like so many words in my life that had been critiqued within an inch of their life, like every I, every T. Wow. So when I started blogging for my business, I wrote the most perfectly structured SEO valued, pieces of information. And I would get the feedback from people, wow, that was really interesting, or it was really important to know that. But I didn't get any warmth from them about the writing. So the information was great, but the engagement was lukewarm. When I got over myself and got over that perfectionist stuff and said, I've just got to try something different here, and I started to really write the way that I spoke, the engagement level went through the roof. It was nuts. And that was the biggest turning point for my own writing. So that is a story that I convey all the time to my perfectionist clients, the ones who have that challenge.
Yeah.
There is definitely a standard measuring thing there where you just have to say sometimes, you know what, I'm going to try something different, and I'm not going to, look like an ass, and I'm not going to write really crappy stuff, but I'm going to perhaps lower the level of expectation around how many edits I do on it. Yeah, I'll write it once, give it a quick edit and publish, rather than sit on it for 3 weeks looking at every comma and semicolon. Yeah. So that is one way to move through that. When it comes to the idea of being unworthy, that again is a really challenging thing for so many small business owners. They perhaps have started a business because they found they were really good at something, and then they realized they could teach that something, and then they go, shit, who am I to teach this? Or who am I to help people with this
Imposter
problem?
syndrome.
Yeah, absolutely. And with that imposter syndrome comes comparisonitis, because we're all looking, oh my God, she's really good at it. How come she can do that? And she seems to be, doing so well. The truth is she's looking to someone else going, how can she do that? And she's doing so well.
Yeah.
We're all looking to someone who is a little bit ahead of us. And that's actually not a bad thing. That's actually called growth, right?
Yeah.
That's actually, if we flip that sort of issue on its head, I really look at that as growth and say, well, wow, if she's doing that, how can I learn from that and get to where she is? And then, okay, well, once she's there, how can I learn from that process and get to somewhere else and get to the next level? So I think it's about reframing that stuff and saying, you know what, she looks like she's really doing great at that. Instead of feeling sad and negative about it, say, what little piece can I learn from that? And again, not copycatting, but saying, how does she do that? how can I do that in my own business and reflect that back to my people? Is that of value to mine? And it might be a process thing rather than actual content thing,
Yeah.
or it might be a positioning thing. So there's so many little pieces in there, but it's about reframing that and really saying, you know what, someone has paid me to help them and I have helped them, then I am worthy,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
I'm worthy of this business. So I want to help more people with that thing. Let me go out and find those people who need my help.
Yeah.
And that's as simple and as complex as I really think it should be. And that's why it is so important to know that audience and what you're helping them with, not all their other problems. They might have a myriad of other problems, but
Yeah.
you can't help them with everything. Figure out what you want to help them with and what you're great at helping people with, and do that, and
Yeah.
do that alone.
Yeah. And there's that's great and such good advice. And I think that another part of that which I would like to add is that when you do see someone and you do compare, because I think it's natural to compare, and so I don't think, like you said, it's about not comparing, it's about reframing what happens when you compare, and rather than going into, I'm not enough or overwhelm, actually looking at the benefits and what you can take from it. And I would like to go one step further and not just go, well, what part of this are they doing well, but bring some more, I suppose, humanity into it, and or humanness rather into it, and go, there's nothing, people are people, and there's nothing wrong with actually reaching out to someone and saying, I love the way you did this. This is what my message is and what I'm trying to achieve. We're actually got a very similar big why. We may not have the same modality. We might. I'm not here to, to plagiarize or copy your stuff, but I would love to have a chat and guidance. And they might say, look, I'm really busy, I don't do coffee chats or whatever. And others might go, I would love to, offer some advice because someone, one day gave me that and I would love to give that back. And I think that reaching out is, people
Oh,
should be
yeah.
scared of doing that.
Absolutely. And look, you know what? That's how some of the greatest collaborations happen too. Like genuine, commercial collaborations can come out of those sorts of conversations too, because you realize that you may have complementary modalities, but a similar audience. And so then there's all this stuff that you can actually offer together, which becomes far more powerful for those people that you're serving as well. And you both learn from each other. Someone might, person A might be amazing at getting their messaging right and creating content, but you might actually be really, really good at creating experiences.
Yep.
And so when that comes together, you can create magic, and that it's really powerful. So definitely not being afraid to connect. So observing is one thing, but definitely taking that step further and connecting and saying, you know what, I think we might actually have some similarities. Or if you think it's too close for comfort, that's fine. Some people get really scared about that.
Yep.
But then others will definitely say, you know what, actually, there's so much work to go around. There are so many people we can help. Let's do this together, or let's try something together, or learn from each other, or just mastermind once a month together.
Absolutely. You could just get a good biz sister or big, biz
Yeah,
person, a biz support person.
definitely.
And, I think that that's a really good point. And it is about connection, because in order for us to achieve anything, whether it's connecting with ourselves, connecting with our audience, or connecting with our colleagues, in order to, I suppose, have impact and outcome for the benefit of whatever we're trying to achieve, which hopefully for most people today in small business, and I would say most women in small business particularly, are there to try to make a difference in people's lives, to try to help better people's lives. And
Yeah.
so overall, we might be doing it in a different way, but we're all trying to achieve the same thing. And just because someone's become an influencer on social media and someone might be just starting out on social media, it doesn't make one better than another. And like you said, that there's different things that they could actually collaborate on. So I'd really encourage anyone who's listening now to really feel that they can reach out, and it gives the other person also an opportunity to practice their own boundaries.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And boundaries are super duper important when it comes to all of this stuff. You've got to know them. You've got to say no when you really mean no, and say yes when you really want to go wholeheartedly into something. It's, I think as small business owners, A lot of your listeners might be parents as well. And, we have busy lives, and we've got to try and fit all the pieces of the puzzle together so that we're not running manically, but that we're enjoying each of those pieces. And I think when you work together with other people to learn from them, you can shortcut stuff really, really well too, which is important. I'm a big fan of that. Why spend 6 months learning something yourself when you can get a 20-minute phone call with someone and learn it overnight? I think there's a lot of value in connecting with people to help you grow, to help more people to achieve what they want to achieve, and so the world goes round. You can't do
And
it all in isolation.
I mean, I'm a big advocate of and hence why I do this podcast as well, of putting, of championing other people. And there's nothing wrong, it doesn't make you any less just because you've shared something of someone else's. So if someone else articulates it in a way where you, instead of comparing and feeling less than, you can just copy. You can actually copy completely what they've said. You can post it on yours and say the words are written by this person. So you've actually referenced them, and you can add to that going, they took this is exactly, they've articulated exactly what I want to share. And so you're championing them, you're gaining, they get more, just because they might get more followers out of it, it doesn't mean that you're not. It's showing your values of collaboration, your values. It's giving people that connective element, a bit more about you and the type of person that you are.
Yeah. Oh, look, that whole content, that sort of leads to a whole other conversation about content curation versus creation.
Yep.
So when you're actually curating content and sharing other people's stuff, I mean, yes, you 100% have to reference it correctly. But it's actually really, really powerful too for both audiences, because you are demonstrating definitely people's opinions who you align with or don't align with. That's okay too. And you're adding your own piece to the conversation. So I would never suggest, say, share a blog, but don't say anything about it. You always need to add your 2 cents worth in. But then it is great for them, and it's also good for your audience. And then you can start to do cross-promotion, all those sorts of things. But content curation is actually a really important part of any content marketing strategy, because we simply can't create stuff all the time. We're busy people trying to do the thing that we do. But curating other people's content, sharing links, sharing podcasts, sharing video that's valuable to your audience is awesome. Why go and reinvent the wheel?
Absolutely. I'm a big advocate of curation, both of people, of knowledge, of material. So I think curation is super important, and it just gives that more connection and more collaborative approach, rather than this competitive marketplace, which hopefully is disappearing a lot more.
Definitely.
So I suppose we've talked about a lot, and we've talked about some of the benefits of how the importance of storytelling and what it can achieve, and some of the things that stop us doing that and don't serve us, and things that we can do in order to create better content. I suppose one other thing which I'm just want to get a bit of clarity on, and we did touch a little bit on it, but is that idea of public versus private. And so there is a lot of oversharing that happens, and a lot of people are now since the whole notion of authentic marketing has come into play, and authenticity and vulnerability and all of those areas which are such, I suppose, key words now, that people, which are really important. It is important, I do believe, in vulnerability in order to connect really well. But that line of vulnerability in a forum like social media, say example, or even blogs, something that's in a public forum, where do you sit with that idea of sharing versus oversharing, private versus public, and is it just a personal thing?
This is a minefield. I am very much of the opinion that it's a personal thing. I don't think I think the actual phrase oversharing is a misnomer. Because if I want to share it, who, like, far be it from you to tell me if I'm oversharing or not.
I love that.
So I actually think that sharing is what it is. If I am prepared to share it and you're not prepared to see it or consume it, that's your issue, not mine.
Mm.
So nobody is forcing me to create the video and press publish.
Yeah.
Nobody is forcing me to write that rant and press publish. If I'm prepared to share it, then I also, though, need to be prepared for the feedback
Mm.
and what comes from that sharing. So that is usually the part that people get fearful of.
Mm.
So if I say this, what will my audience think? And again, comes back to that piece that I've talked about a number of times. You need to be prepared and to know that audience well enough to know whether or not you're going to lose 95% of them if you share this, or whether you're going to gain another 95%. So by sharing anything, you need to be ready for the repercussions, good,
Mm.
bad, or otherwise. I think when you decide to take on a social profile, you, by virtue of that, you are a public person, right? So you have very much said to the world, I'm here, I've got something to say, I want to connect with you by sharing information and consuming information.
Mm.
That is what a social network is. And I think that we get a little bit head up about what should and shouldn't be seen on there, what can and can't be said. End of the day, it's personal preference. If I went to a room, a physical room with 100 people in it, there would be people saying things that I don't want to hear. There'll be people sharing things that I don't want to listen to. And so I won't. I'll either walk away from them, or I'll have an argument with them, or I'll just disappear. It's
Yeah.
the same on social media, right? It's just actually a heightened version of what we're doing in public spaces anyway. So we don't love everybody we come into contact with. We don't agree with everybody's values who we come into contact with. Most polite people in modern society will agree to disagree and move on. And I think that's what's missing a little bit in social media, is that
Mm.
there's a few too many keyboard warriors who have decided that, okay, maybe I won't just agree to disagree and I'll try and vent and impress my values on somebody else. You know what? That is the platform, that is the technology. It allows people to do that. But mostly we're decent human beings. And I think that the people that you and I interact with are not doing that stuff. There are ways to shut down those sorts of conversations very quickly. Again, if you've got a really good following, anytime that stuff comes up, you will usually find that your tribe go into bat for you and you don't even have to say anything, which is really, really powerful. And when that happens, it warms your heart. It's pretty amazing.
Yeah. Yeah.
But, you know, I've been on Facebook since almost day dot. I was a really, really early adopter because of the space that I was working in prior to my own business. And I have never once had a troll.
Mm.
And I say all sorts of things on social. I share a lot more than a lot of people do. I have never once had anybody really stalk me, be a troll, be nasty. And I have been on there for way more than a decade. So
Mm.
I think it's just playing in the space nicely, playing in the way that you would normally play when you're with human beings, and being mindful that, yes, there are some people who feel a bit braver behind a keyboard than they do in person. But, you know, that's their problem and not yours.
Yeah.
It's how you react to that that's important. And it's the same as if the kid in the playground yelled at you and called you nasty names. How do you react to that?
Mm.
How do you deal with the fear of that? How do you give voice to that kid?
Yeah. And,
Kind of
and,
the
I,
same.
and I think that something that comes to light for me here is going back to what we talked about earlier, and that is that planning and strategy phase. So really having knowledge of what, like asking yourself maybe before you post, even if it is on your personal page and not work related, asking yourself, what am I trying to achieve with this post? You know, like, am I just randomly doing it without consciousness, but actually bringing consciousness and mindfulness back to posting? And, and that reminded me of, for those who don't know, Joe and I were just recently in Fiji together, where I was running 4 panel discussions. And one of the ones I was running was about this idea of the modern struggle between connection and disconnection in the modern world of technology. And Joe was a panelist on that panel, in that discussion. And one of the things she shared, which was really interesting, which I thought is relatable here, is that you choose to share photos of your kids on social media, on your business page, because your strategy, part of your strategy, is to promote that freedom lifestyle. And
Yes.
so, yeah, if you can talk a little bit maybe towards that.
Yeah, so that's a very it's a very proactive strategy that I play to, and it's something that, again, I talk with clients about this. It's about finding that line for yourself, how much you do and don't share.
Yeah.
But as I said, and as you said in my intro, like, my business and my vehicle is content marketing coaching and book coaching. But the truth is that what I'm hoping for, having had people work with me, is that they build a business that has freedom and flexibility and fun in it. Those are the 3 F words for me. And through getting your message out there more regularly, your business increases. By sharing and working with the people who you want to work with, it's much more fun. By having a business that pays you well and that returns well for you, you have much more flexibility. So that's actually what I'm selling. And so in my social media, I talk about the holidays I go on, the kids' events I go to midweek because I can. And I talk about the things that I like to buy and the home that I've purchased and the stuff that I do because I can. And it's because of the business that I've built that allows me to do those things. So it's not, here's my kid because I want to show you a picture of my kid. It's a little bit more strategic than that. Some people won't agree with that strategy. That's fine. It's the way that I do it, and I do not pimp out my children for the benefit of my business. So it is not like that, but it is more about highlighting the fact that I am able to run my life and my business my way because I made very conscious choices about it. Part of that is being able to go and cheer on my kid at her school swimming on a Wednesday at 12 o'clock in the midday because I can. I'm not bound to a desk by someone else.
Yeah.
And it's that subtle difference about why and how you're posting. And again, this fits into my content strategy. It is not as random as it looks. It's
Yes.
actually,
And that goes back to that idea that you said earlier about not like being able to deliver something where it doesn't look like it has an end game.
that's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Oh, so much that we've shared here, and we're going to have to cut it off or wind up. But if anybody does have any questions further on this topic, because it is a really juicy topic, it is that whole digital world, especially now coming into this. Who knows whether it be weeks or months where we are in possible lockdown, and people are going to be doing a lot of their communication and a lot of their connection through content creation online. So perhaps maybe if anybody does have any further sort of queries or questions, maybe you can send them to me and I can forward them to Joe, or maybe if there's specific ones, Joe and I can jump on even a Facebook Live and continue the conversation at some point. How does that sound, Joe?
Sounds great. Yeah, no problem at all. Happy to do that. Happy to field any questions about this stuff, but if it's worthy of another conversation, that's cool too.
Yeah, maybe one that's specifically around when people going into lockdown, or a way that they can maybe change their business into more of that online creation. And if you do want to do that, Joe's an amazing person to start with anyway, and really look at, I don't know what your books are like at the moment. They're probably like crazily full. But, maybe should be able to squeeze you in just because you're a listener of this show. But yeah, I wanted to finish up a little bit on the old Native American proverb that says, "Tell me the facts and I'll learn. Tell me the truth and I'll believe. But tell me a story and it will live in my heart forever." Because I think that's an amazing proverb, and it's lasted the stretch of time. It's still so relevant today, and I really, really want to enhance that, it is true to tell a story to someone and really share from that heart space of really, that really connective space really can develop relationships and have such a snowball effect.
Yeah, absolutely can. And I've got Cherokee Indian in my family, and so it resonates particularly with me. But I feel like it's such an important thing to remember that, you know, even if you're trying to teach your children something, or you're trying to get a point across to your partner, or you're trying to share something with a neighbor, it's just as important to share from that heart space, say it and communicate it in a way that's fun and memorable, not that it's just here it is, this is what you have to do. I think that there's been too much of that missing, and because we are in the world, like an era of big data and automation, which is a whole other conversation, but that has led so many people to rely on the facts and rely on the research to run their lives. And I think that if we go too far that way, I mean, there's absolute validity in using stats and data for certain things, but if we go too far that way, we lose that connection, and we you know, if we lose our stories, we lose our ability to relate and to remember each other. So I think
Yeah.
it's super important.
Beautiful. Thanks, Joe, for sharing, so many incredible insights today. And you deliver it, so you should, being the content queen, but, deliver it in such an authentic, clear way that really enables people to have some really good takeaways. And so if you are listening today, we'd love to hear from you. What is your biggest takeaway from today's conversation? Maybe you could leave a comment, let us know wherever what listening platform you're on, whether it be through iTunes or YouTube or through the website, or through a Facebook post where this has been put out on. And you could just leave a comment and let us know some of your big takeaways, and maybe even, like I said before, any further questions that you might have. So if you'd like more information on Joe, where can they find you, Joe?
They can find me on Facebook under The Content Coach, or Instagram, The Content Coach, or my website is thecontentcoach.com.au. Nice and easy.
Perfect. And you've got some retreats coming up?
Yes. I've got a retreat at the end of June and another one at the end of October. They were both supposed to be overseas, Bali in June and October Laos, but now I think they're going to be held locally in Australia. So location to be confirmed, but definitely they're happening, and the information is on the website. They are for business owners who are interested in having a really productive week away creating content for their business.
Awesome. So yeah, mainly content creation, or is it a lot of book writing?
Either or. So creating content for your book, or you might be writing a keynote or a program or social media posts or blogs or whatever it is. So any of those, they're small group retreats, very personalized. So we'll have a coaching session before and after to make sure that your specific outcomes are covered in that week. You get one-on-one coaching with me, group coaching, all the good gear that happens on a retreat.
Oh, it sounds amazing. Can I come?
Yes.
Perfect. So if you've enjoyed today's episode, please share it with your friends. Consider subscribing to the Wealthy Living podcast on iTunes, or on the Wealthy Living YouTube channel, so that you can listen to more conversations with wonderful humans whose stories, knowledge, and actionable ideas and wisdom can help you live a meaningful, connected, and well life, both personally and professionally. I'm Lisa, an integrated life, clarity, and wellbeing coach, a conversation facilitator, and an event creator and host. To find out more about my services, you can visit my website at wealthyliving.com.au. That's WELLTHY living.com.au, or you can connect with me on any of my social media channels. So until next time, remember, connection is medicine.